Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy, where we bring you the stories behind the health headlines.
This podcast is brought to you by Redix Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Body Cream. 800-345-7339, on the web at uttercream.com. Americans swallow a lot of pills. At last count, 4 billion prescriptions are filled each year. Are we taking way too many drugs? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Consumer Reports has declared October 21st National Check Your Meds Day. We'll talk with Lisa Gill, Deputy Content Editor of Best Buy Drugs for Consumer Reports, about the recent cover story, Too Many Meds, America's Love Affair with Prescription Medication.
When do our drugs do more harm than good? More than 1 million emergency department visits each year are due to adverse reactions to one or more medicines. Are you at risk?
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, we welcome your questions and stories about the health news that matters to you.
First, the news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, can indoor tanning be addicting? Most people think of tanning beds as a cosmetic indulgence. But new research suggests that some young women with depression find indoor tanning especially appealing. The authors surveyed nearly 400 young women between 18 and 30 years of age. Many reported regular tanning despite the known risk for skin cancer. Some cited the cosmetic benefits of tanning, but the researchers found that women who were depressed were most dependent on exposure to high-intensity UV light. This study reinforces findings from earlier research that showed ultraviolet rays stimulate the production of dopamine, a brain chemical associated with pleasure. Opioid receptors also appear to respond to UV light. Dermatologists have found that tanning beds may reduce pain in patients with fibromyalgia. Telling young women about the dangers of skin cancer or premature aging from their ultraviolet exposure doesn't seem to work. Instead, the researchers suggest counseling and medications that are used to treat other types of addiction.
New cancer drugs have been welcomed as breakthroughs. They often come with a hefty price tag. Many cost over $100,000 a year. That might be justified if there were solid evidence that they save lives. Cures for cancer have been few and far between. A new analysis in the BMJ evaluated 48 cancer drugs that the European equivalent of the FDA, the European Medicines Agency, approved between 2009 and 2013. The authors concluded that many of these cancer drugs were approved, quote, without evidence of benefit on survival or quality of life. Even more than 3 years after approval, there remains a paucity of solid scientific evidence of substantial benefit.
At this time of year, everyone is supposed to get a flu shot. The vaccination is supposed to protect people who are particularly vulnerable to influenza. Children with leukemia fit into that category. A new study in the Journal of Pediatrics shows, however, that flu shots were not effective at protecting against influenza infections in children hospitalized at St. Jude for leukemia treatment. The study included data on 498 children being treated for acute leukemia during 3 different flu seasons. There were 354 youngsters who were vaccinated and 144 who were not. There was no difference between the two groups in the rates of flu-like illness and confirmed influenza. The researchers say patients should still get their flu shots, and so should family members. But they suggest that these disturbing results warrant further investigation.
Have you ever strained to understand what someone is saying in a noisy restaurant? Even people with hearing aids can have difficulty following a conversation when there's a great deal of background noise. Now, researchers report that an audio game training the brain to make sense of sounds in a noisy situation can improve performance. Older people with hearing impairment got 3 times more benefit from playing the brain training game than they got from hearing aids alone. Their hearing had not improved, but their ability to understand what they heard had. The study included 24 people, approximately 70 years old, with mild to severe hearing loss.
One important complication of hepatitis B is liver cancer. Now, researchers report that a simple treatment with a drug more than a century old can significantly lower the risk of liver cancer. The investigators utilized medical records from the National Health Insurance Research Database of Taipei. There were more than 200,000 people with hepatitis B between 1998 and 2012, and 1,553 had received daily aspirin for at least 90 days during that time. Their records were matched to those of 6,212 patients who had not taken aspirin or other antiplatelet drugs. Those on aspirin were much less likely to develop liver cancer. Their rate of hepatocellular carcinoma was 2.86%, compared to 5.59% for other hepatitis B patients. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon. I'm a medical anthropologist.
And I'm Joe Graydon. I'm a pharmacologist. How many pills do you take each day? Have you bothered to count them? Are they essential for your health?
The September issue of Consumer Reports had a cover story titled Too Many Meds. The lead paragraph points out that Americans are taking more prescription pills than ever before and more than people in any other country. But that may be doing more harm than good. Consumer Reports declared today National Check Your Meds Day. Why is this initiative so important?
To help us better understand the research behind this article and why we should check all of our meds today, we turn to Lisa Gill. She's Deputy Content Editor of Best Buy Drugs for Consumer Reports.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. Lisa Gill.
Thanks so much for having me today.
We're delighted that you can join us again. Lisa, the Consumer Reports issue for September 2017 has a very provocative cover. I mean, it is an amazing story. A lot of research went into this. The question is, too many meds, and you see a gentleman, in a sense, drowning in a giant pill bottle. What prompted this research?
Sure. So we have been very concerned about the safety of Americans in regards to their medications and how many medications they take and what sort of safety problems that could trigger. And for the last several years of our work, we've started to really track how often people take medications and the result of those. And one of the most incredible things that we found while researching this was that the amount of prescriptions written for Americans is higher today than any other time in history and than any other country in the world. Last year, 4.4 billion prescriptions were written and filled. That is double what it was 20 years ago. And so that kind of information started to get us to really look deeper at what does that mean? What is the impact of that? And a stunning impact is that many prescriptions sends a tremendous number of people to the emergency rooms every year as a result of an adverse drug event or a side effect. In fact, the stat that we used in the story was 1.3 million emergency room visits related to some medication or combination of medications that people were taking. And of those 1.3 million people, about 124,000 people died. That, to us, is an extremely concerning number. So that by itself was enough to get us started. But as we continued to dig a little deeper, we found other things that were really just as alarming. Every year we do a nationally representative telephone survey to really try to understand how many people take a medication, how much they pay for them, how often are they talking to the doctor about problems, and so on. So we're just trying to get an understanding really of just what the typical American faces in this area. And we learned this year that more than half, just about 55% of all adult Americans regularly take at least one prescription drug. So for regular, what we asked was, are you taking a medication for longer than 3 months? 55% of Americans said, yes, I am. And not only that, the mean number, really the average number, is about 4. So that was, you sit back and you go, wow, it's not just 1 or 2, it's 4 prescription medications. And a sizable amount of those folks take at least 1 over-the-counter drug and 1 or 2 supplements. So it's a lot of pills. And when you think about the harms, it was enough to prompt us to do probably one of the largest stories I've ever worked on, a 16-page story really delving into the potential harm and how you can avoid it.
Lisa, do we have any idea why Americans are taking so many pills?
Sure. So we started to really, that was the question we asked. What really feeds into this? And there are a number of not very surprising things. Everything from the rise of drug advertising and the billions of dollars spent by drug companies to communicate the virtues and downsides of their new products to consumers. Several billion a year is spent on that. Drug companies also spend billions of dollars on promotions to doctors to really encourage them to try to prescribe a medication for all kinds of problems and things. So that's sort of one of the first areas, promotion and drug advertising. The second is that we think there is a culture, and we get this from talking to lots of doctors, reading a lot of literature and reading a lot of books and trying to understand what's happening in the doctor world. And what we uncover really is there's a culture of prescribing. A pill for every ill, a pill for every symptom, a remedy for every problem. And what's very cool, though, in the process of this is we found that there were doctors really resisting that culture. And that culture has been growing, and I think it actually tracks very closely over the last 20 years to the sharp increase in the number of prescriptions written. But you can see very clearly that there are some doctors putting the brakes on it. There's groups like Slow Medicine. Slow Medicine is a sort of an informal grassroots group of doctors around the country and actually around the world who have really pledged to dial back that prescribing. There's groups like Preventing Overdiagnosis, also a worldwide group of researchers, scientists, physicians who have dedicated themselves to looking very deeply into different types of conditions, actually some of the conditions that we list, trying to understand how conditions have been, the definition of those conditions have been broadened to the point that a normal person is suddenly ill, considered sick. They're not sick, but considered by maybe a medical standard, and that's one of the drivers of prescribing. So we can see that changing disease definitions, a culture of prescribing, a lot of advertising and promotion sort of meld together to really, it's almost a perfect storm of prescribing for Americans for medications that they may not need.
Lisa, it's not just that we take more pills than any other group of people in the world. We pay more.
That's right.
I mean, it's unbelievable how much Americans spend on prescription and over-the-counter medications. It's
shocking. So the last stats that we looked at that I particularly like, it's about $425 billion, and that's billion with a B. And that number is before all the rebates and all the backroom, under the table rebates and things that they pass, the drug companies and other parts of the supply chain pass back and forth. They'll argue there's about $100 billion in there that gets passed around, and they'll always give you a number that's closer to $385 billion. But we like the $400 billion. It shows you $425. It shows you just how much money is in the system. We pay more than any other country in the world by far and away, and we pay more out of our own pockets. We've seen from our national surveys that people spend in the area of about $650 a year just out of pocket. And those costs are rapidly rising, which is another problem, too.
Are we getting good value for what we're paying?
That is a good question. One thing we can see is that the effect of when people cannot afford the medication, people walk away from prescriptions, people don't take medications as prescribed, they share medications when they should not, they split pills without asking doctors or pharmacists. So the price pressure puts a lot of restraints on how people respond. And what we found just recently, actually this year, was that I'm trying to remember the numbers, about 33 million people walked away from prescriptions last year because they could not afford the copay or the payment. Your question is, how are we getting good value for those dollars? I would argue not always. There are more generics than ever available on the market, low-cost generics that people have access to. Some of those prices have gone up. Insurance coverage has gone down. So what an insurance company covers for a consumer maybe less than what it was even several years ago. So people are paying more for the same old thing, and I think that's where we get into trouble.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the more ordinary drugs for heartburn or high blood pressure, things like that. When is it appropriate to try non-drug approaches?
Yes, so that was part of what our story looked at. We identified 12 conditions for which we, not just Consumer Reports, but also in agreement with standard medical guidelines, non-drug approaches are sometimes your very best bet. And we encourage people to try those first, and everything from, as you point out, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, overactive bladder, insomnia, mild depression, even joint pain. The research is solid enough, and there's enough of it to demonstrate that, for example, back and joint pain, instead of rushing right away, although over-the-counter medications actually can be very effective, but instead of rushing right away to those things, other options like yoga, gentle stretching, massage, physical therapy have incredible benefits that are actually well documented in a number of studies, and that they have much longer term benefits with no downside of a drug side effect.
You're listening to Lisa Gill. She's Deputy Content Editor for Best Buy Drugs of Consumer Reports. The Consumer Reports issue on Too Many Meds was published in September, and we have a link to it from our website.
Consumer Reports has declared today National Check Your Meds Day. They recommend a brown bag review of everything you're taking. That means you need to talk to your doctor and pharmacist for advice on whether there's anything you might not need. Be sure to ask exactly how to discontinue it, because if that's the advice, some drugs should not be stopped abruptly, like proton pump inhibitors, acid suppressors, antidepressants, pain meds like gabapentin or tramadol.
Well, we'd love to hear from you. Have you been able to reduce the number of meds you're taking? If so, how did you do it? If not, do you worry about taking too many meds? Give us a call and ask a question or share your story. It's 888-472-3366. If the lines are full, you can send an email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com. Or you can also reach us through Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy. That number again, 888-472-3366.
And Terry, we get so many messages on a regular basis from people who are taking a blood pressure pill, a mood stabilizer, something for their heartburn, something for their irregular heart rhythms. I mean, the list goes on. And sometimes people are taking not just 4, but 5, 10, even 20 drugs at the same time.
That's kind of scary, and it's actually very difficult to check for interactions among that many drugs.
Exactly. Well, we do need to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more with Lisa Gill. We'll also take your questions. We welcome your stories about too many prescriptions. Our lines are open at 888-472-3366. Again, you can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or reach us via Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that moisturize deeply to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number's 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you would like to purchase a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. This is show number 1098. Or you can find it at our website, peoplespharmacy.com.
Are you taking multiple medications? For example, blood pressure pill, cholesterol-lowering drug, or an acid-suppressing medication? Do you know how they interact or affect your nutrition? Tell us about it. Our lines are open. The number is 888-472-3366. Send us an email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
We're talking with Lisa Gill. She's Deputy Content Editor of Best Buy Drugs for ConsumerReports.com.
So, Lisa, what is the recommendation from Consumer Reports? How do we get off this train of too many meds?
Right. So the first step and the first thing that we have really tried to power for is to encourage people to have a conversation with their physician or their pharmacist about the current list of medications, over-the-counter, like prescription medications, over-the-counter drugs, supplements, and vitamins that they're already taking. We can see, and this was I have to say, an eye-opener for me. I was astounded to find out in our nationally representative survey of people who regularly take a prescription drug and who are taking garden variety medications over long periods of time, 35% of people never had anyone look at the full list of all the medications that they're taking. Now think about that for a minute. That's 1 out of every 3 people who go up and fill a prescription all the time, every month. No one has ever looked at the full list of what they're taking. And I'm encouraged to hear that when people do ask that question of their physician, Americans told us that in basically 3/4 of the time, a doctor was able to reduce the list of drugs they take by at least 1 drug, which was an indicator to us that there's a lot of medications out there that people are taking they may not need. And that sort of string of data for us was an excellent motivator for us to declare October 21st National Check Your Meds Day. And that's on a Saturday. And our hope is that you will take your list. It's basically a brown bag review. And we hope that you'll take your list of all your medications, your supplements, vitamins, and over-the-counter drugs, and visit your local pharmacy. You do not necessarily need to make an appointment, although they always appreciate it. Go and have that discussion, or make an appointment with your doctor. Make sure you go over this list at minimum once a year, but truly every time you go to the physician, and ideally every time you go to the pharmacy.
Lisa, what is a brown bag review, and why is it helpful?
Right. So a brown bag review is a chance to sit down with a health professional. It can be a nurse practitioner, a pharmacist, your physician. And brown bag review is really sort of an old school term. The idea was that you would take all your prescription pills, your bottles, and everything, and pop them into a brown bag and head over to your pharmacy or your doctor's office. You can still do that, but we kind of decided not to use that term. People don't always use brown bags. They use modern ways of keeping track of their medications, maybe a list on their cell phone or maybe a handwritten list. They may not carry their drugs around all the time. So the brown bag review is really just a great chance to sit down and look at everything that you're taking, have a discussion about the potential side effects or anything you're experiencing. Look at, do you still need certain medications you may no longer need? They may be treating side effects of other medications, which is something that we like to say is a no-no. You definitely don't want to do that if you can avoid it. It's just a good chance to have a conversation and potentially stop taking a couple of your drugs.
Lisa, I'd like to ask you about the idea of taking drugs to treat the side effects of other drugs. And you have in this article from Consumer Reports an interesting case example from a woman by the name of Nicole, who started out with a drug called alprazolam. What happened to her, and why is that such a good example of how we end up in this sort of vicious cycle syndrome of taking medicine to ease the symptoms of other medicine, which in and of themselves may cause more side effects that require more medicine?
Right. So this case with Nicole was a sad story. And when we got this story, we were dumbfounded by what this poor woman had experienced. She went on alprazolam, which is Xanax. And when she was a young person, she was very stressed about her new job. And she's a physician's assistant. And so you would think in the medical profession they would know better and they would treat each other even more carefully. but that was not the case. And her side effects were depression, she was exhausted, she was suicidal, and she said she was scared. So she started visiting a couple of other doctors, and their response was to give her a stimulant, Adderall, which is typically used for ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADD, and in the hope that this would help with the side effect of her Xanax. Well, that did not work at all. It made her even more nervous, and it made her just utterly sick, and she said that she was homebound. She couldn't even leave the house. And then on top of it, she started seeing a gastroenterologist. She started seeing other physicians, including a dermatologist. And all of these physicians, nobody ever questioned this list of medications. And it was a sad story. She finally was able to get off of these drugs. It took her a long time, and she sort of carries the pain of that with her and her story. But it's a good example of not wanting to, or at least the advice of not necessarily treating your side effect, a known side effect of a current drug you're taking, with another medication. It can be a pretty bad path.
Lisa, it sounds like we patients need to step up and take charge in some situations to make sure we're not being over-medicated.
That's right. So it's being an advocate for yourself. And here's the thing. I think it's incredibly difficult to go into a physician's office and you're sick or you're suffering in pain or you have other issues, and you're sitting on the doctor's, you're sitting on the exam table, you're in a flimsy gown, it's cold and bright, and it's hard to have that conversation. It's hard to ask, do I really need this medication? Is there something else I could do instead? What if I stopped smoking, or what if I started exercising more? It's not easy to advocate yourself in a position where you don't feel that you have equal power with that physician. So what we recommend, a couple things. One thing I do is make a list of questions I want to answer before I go to the physician's office. That way I've got it ready. I use my cell phone, but you can write it down on a piece of paper and take it with you. That way it helps to organize your thoughts so that you're not caught off guard and that you're not just reacting to what the doctor is saying. The other thing is to bring somebody with you. We call them a patient advocate, but it could be anybody. It could be your spouse, friend, family member, who can sort of act as your proxy, act on your behalf, and ask those important questions, and really spur the doctor or nurse practitioner to have a better discussion with you. That's really what you're trying to do. But you're right. You do have to advocate for yourself. It's not the thing that you want. I mean, especially when you're sick, it's hard to initiate those conversations. And I don't think any of us here are under the illusion that that's easy, but we suggest that it can make the difference in your health, and it can mean you can get better, more correct treatments for what you really need.
Lisa Gill, thanks so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Lisa Gill, Deputy Content Editor for Best Buy Drugs at ConsumerReports.com.
And we have a link to the article, Too Many Meds? On peoplespharmacy.com. Are you taking a lot of different prescriptions, or somebody in your family perhaps? We'd love to hear from you. Give us a call at 888-472-3366. If our lines are full, you can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or via Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy.
And Joe, we do have an email from Mary commenting on the culture of prescribing. She says very few doctors know of any treatment besides drugs and surgery. Most insurance doesn't cover alternative treatments. As one example, Medicare doesn't cover acupuncture.
Yes, and here's an interesting email. This one is from Marilyn. She says, my sister seems to be having the following side effects: sweating, drowsiness, dry mouth. By the way, dry mouth, that's a real tip-off. Sore throat, clumsiness, weakness, unsteady gait, breathing problems, stomach bloating, and rapid weight gain. She's been on many meds since 23, carbamazepam, known as Tegretol. It's a mood stabilizer. Fluoxetine for depression. Zoloft for depression. Wait a minute.
So she's on several medications for depression.
Yeah, 2 SSRIs.
Plus the carbamazepine.
Plus Ambien for sleep. Plus atenolol, tenormin for high blood pressure. Then there's Zestril, also for high blood pressure. Verapamil, also for high blood pressure. Hydrochlorothiazide, a diuretic, also for high blood pressure.
So how many blood pressure medicines does she need?
1, 2, 3. She's on 4. Then she's
Wow.
taking Actos for her diabetes. And by the way, hydrochlorothiazide can raise blood sugar levels.
Sure.
Then she's taking Amaryl for diabetes as well. She's taking Levoxyl for her thyroid. She's taking Lipitor, atorvastatin for her cholesterol. She's taking coated aspirin. And she's taking either Pepcid or Zantac for reflux. Could any of those meds be interacting or affecting her symptoms? Yeah, quite possibly.
Quite possibly, because some of those antidepressants can actually cause insomnia, which would lead to the sleeping medication, right?
Exactly.
Well, we go to the phones, 888-472-3366 in Wilmington, North Carolina. Dave, welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Good morning. How are you doing?
We're doing well. What's up?
Well, for several years, I was taking Pepcid for acid reflux, very bad acid reflux. I couldn't get through the day. I didn't feel good. But it began to affect my bowels. And so one day I just decided I had to do something different. So I went to the health store and got a hold of some aloe vera. And I did a switch. It was a little hard for about a week, but I did a switch to aloe vera, and I've been there about 6 months and with some very good results. And also, through one of these programs, I heard about taking heavy doses of vitamin C and E instead of blood pressure medicine. My whole family suffers from blood pressure medicine. And I was in the elevated, but not bad yet. But I started taking 4,000 milligrams of C and 1,200 IU of E daily. And my blood pressure in about 3 months dropped 25 points on both scales.
Well,
I think they're both pluses.
Definitely it's a plus when you can use something other than prescription medication to manage your conditions. And so getting off the Pepcid, that's great. Not having to take blood pressure medicine is great. I'm not aware of the research that would support vitamin C and vitamin E to reduce blood pressure, but if it's working for you, that's great.
You know what's so interesting, Dave, is that you can measure your blood pressure and you can see the results. And so when people say, well, I changed my diet, I exercised, I lost 15 pounds, and I saw my blood pressure go down 20 points, that's pretty convincing that lifestyle makes a difference.
Not only that, there's research on all of that stuff. So we definitely can say that changing your diet, going towards a more DASH-style diet with lots of fruits and vegetables, not too much processed stuff, not much meat, that'll help with the blood pressure too.
888-472-3366 is the number to call. We have an email from Dr. David, Terry. Dr. David says, my aunt in Florida was doing poorly, so I took my mother to see her. I was asked to review the meds. Now, remember, this is a doctor. She had 6 over-the-counter drugs, 25 prescribed drugs with various dangerous or negating interactions, and she was barely able to get out of bed.
I can imagine with 25 drugs on board and plus the 6 over-the-counters, that's scary.
After I spent an afternoon documenting what her primary care doc knew but would not change because specialists had prescribed the drugs, my aunt woke up and entered the conversation. I told her she needed 2 of the OTCs at most and less than a handful of the prescriptions. Her response was almost out of the Jefferson Airplane song, "That's all right. Those don't do anything anyway." The medication taper was painful and required emergency department visits, but my aunt got off most of the benzos, the benzodiazepines, narcotics, and sleepers, I assume that's the sleeping pills, as well as most of the other multi-specialty prescription drugs. What a mess. She woke up and lived pretty well for the next 5 years.
That's really impressive. So we appreciate that message from Dr. David. Let's go back to the phones, Joe. Jared in Texas, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's your comment or question, please?
Hi, first I'd like to thank you all for taking my call. Really enjoy the show. I just wanted to shed the light on the culture that's created from generation to generation. When I met my wife, she was 20 years old, had one of those Monday through Sunday pill containers, and it just struck me as very odd coming from a family who wasn't very dependent on prescription medication. She had everything from Zoloft to Ambien to, pills to help her pay attention, help her go to sleep, help her wake up. Her hands were shaky. She seemed hard to keep her attention, even though she was taking medication to help with this ailment. And after persistent trying to get her to stop taking these drugs, she's better off now. We've been married for 2 years. She's very successful at work. She's able to have meaningful relationships, hold conversations. I just thought it was interesting how no one had ever told her before that maybe you don't need this stuff, seeing as how she was so adamant about taking it for so many years. I just thought it was interesting and was pertinent to the conversation.
Well, we think so too. Thanks so much for calling, Jared. And I think it does make a difference if you grow up in a family where the expectation is that if there's, a twinge or an itch or a sneeze or a sniffle, that you take a medication for it, versus growing up in a family where they say, how can we deal with this without medication? Sometimes you need medicine, but not every single moment.
Well, all you have to do is turn on television.
Ah, right.
Because there are so many prescription drug ads on TV telling you that there is a pill for every ill, not just the prescription drug ads, but also the over-the-counter drug ads. It's hardly any wonder that everybody is popping pills these days. Let's go to Dr. Charles in Ahoskie, North Carolina, line 2.
Okay, Dr. Charles, welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Hi, Terry. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
My question. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're on. What's up? We have about a minute before the break.
My question is, why aren't doctors using electronic medical records that enable them to do drug-drug and drug-patient problem interactions as part of their medication reconciliation efforts, and thereby be able to cut down on the number of medicines that a patient uses?
Dr. Charles, it's a brilliant question. In theory, the electronic medical records were supposed to do that. Every time you go to the doctor these days, somebody, usually a nurse or somebody else in the office, will take a list of your meds, but I'm not sure anybody's really checking. And we've heard that the pharmacists are so busy these days, they may not be either.
Do they actually look at that list when they get it, in the record?
Well,
good question.
That's a great question. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to take more of your calls and questions. Terry, what's the number to call?
The number to call, 888-472-3366. You can also reach us on email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy. You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. If you're enjoying this People's Pharmacy podcast, why not head over to our website where you'll find a wealth of information on medications, conditions, home remedies, and ways to keep yourself healthy. You'll find it all at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Red X Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth creams and lotions, helping dry, cracked skin feel utterly soft and smooth. 800-345-7339. online at uttercream.com.
If you'd like to purchase a CD of this show or any People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is 1098, or visit the website. It's peoplespharmacy.com.
Today, we're talking about the health news that matters to you. We spoke with Lisa Gill, Deputy Content Editor for Best Buy Drugs at ConsumerReports.com. She told us that 1.3 million people went to emergency rooms because of adverse drug events in 2014. 124,000 of them died as a result. Many such reactions are preventable. Have you ever experienced a serious drug reaction that took you to the emergency room? We'd like to hear about it. 888-472-3366.
We also have a link to the Best Buy Drugs article, Too Many Meds, at peoplespharmacy.com. Has a loved one been injured or died because of a bad side effect or an interaction? You can tell us about it. Again, our number is 888-472-3366. You can also email us. We're radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or you can reach us through Twitter. Again, that's at People's Pharmacy.
And Joe, Claudia did reach us through Twitter. She writes, as a pharmacist, I always recommend non-drug remedies first. Example, fiber if appropriate for constipation, along with exercise and increased water intake. For those who ask about weight or diabetes, I suggest consultation with a dietitian. Many times insurance will pay.
And Terry, today is a very special day.
It is. It is National Check Your Meds Day, a good day to go check in with your pharmacist about the medications that you are taking. Take a list of absolutely everything. Include all the dietary supplements and the over-the-counter medicines along with the list of all of your prescription drugs.
And tell them the People's Pharmacy sent you.
Oh, yeah, they'll love us.
And let them know that that's because of the Consumer Reports article, Too Many Meds. Now, we have to warn you. You've been hearing scary stories, but never, ever stop taking any medication suddenly on your own without talking to your physician or your pharmacist first. For example, if you were taking cetirizine, Zyrtec, for your allergies, and you stop suddenly, you might develop a really terrible rash and itchiness in a couple of days. The itchiness for some people is just unbearable. A drug like desvenlafaxine, Pristiq, or Celexa, citalopram, or duloxetine, Cymbalta, can all cause rebound problems if you stop suddenly. So can the acid-suppressing drugs like esomeprazole, Nexium, or lansoprazole, Prevacid, or omeprazole, Prilosec.
And the most recent drug we learned has a rebound effect is low-dose aspirin. People who stop taking their low-dose aspirin are at an increased risk of a cardiovascular event. So you want to make sure that you've checked this out carefully with your physician before you stop taking anything that you have been prescribed. Let's go back to the phones, Joe. In Greenville, North Carolina, we want to talk to John. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, John.
What's on your mind?
Yes, hello. Hi, Joe and Terry. I'm wondering if there's a similar concern with taking a variety of supplements. I'm a regular listener to your program, and, a lot of times I get suggestions to optimize my vitamin D, B12, and recently I started taking the AREDS too for eye health. And, again, I'm wondering if there's a similar concern with taking a variety of over-the-counter vitamins and supplements.
Well, I have to tell you, John, I think that is one of the great sort of black holes of medicine today, because even in 2017, a lot of physicians and pharmacists have not been well trained in dietary supplements or vitamins, and especially how they may interact with prescription or over-the-counter medications. So if you're taking a handful of pills, let's just say, coenzyme Q10 together with warfarin, which is a blood thinner, that could be a problem. You could also get into trouble with some of the vitamins, minerals, and other medications you may be taking. Again, that is why it is so important to at least ask your physician and your pharmacist to check. There are some pretty good programs out there. The one that we like to rely on is called Epocrates. It is a paid prescription kind of thing. You have to subscribe, but once you do that, you can find out about how drugs and herbs and dietary supplements interact. So, John, your question is really, really important. Thank you for making the call.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye. Terry, I have an email. My husband was taking many medications and sustained a series of falls in April and May. While he was in a rehab hospital, I checked his prescription drugs on the internet to find out the side effects of each medicine. Of the drugs he was taking, at least 7 could cause dizziness as a side effect. When he came home after a visit to his primary care doctor, I stopped all his medicines except for his high blood pressure pill. I asked the doctor first. I also requested a blood test for vitamin B1. The results showed he was low in B1, an essential vitamin that helps brain function. My husband started taking it and has not had a fall or been dizzy since stopping all these prescriptions. And sometimes we think, oh, dizziness. That's not such a big deal.
It is a big deal if you fall down and break something.
Absolutely.
And even if you don't break something, a bad fall can really shake you up. Joe, we've got another email. This one is from Teresa. She says, I am on Xarelto for AFib and A-flutter. I don't have high blood pressure, but I've been put on metoprolol tartrate to try to keep my heartbeat regular. My blood pressure is typically very low, around 110/80 or 94/70, even without meds. I've been on these meds for 8 months. Within 2 months, my hair started falling out, my mouth is very dry, my hot flashes have returned, and my cardiologist says the meds have nothing to do with these side effects. And Teresa says, I don't believe him. And she wonders if there's a natural way to treat atrial fibrillation. We don't know of a natural way to treat atrial fibrillation,
No.
and it's serious. It does need to be treated. But the hair falling out is almost certainly a drug side effect. It's not an unusual side effect, especially for many blood pressure medicines.
And here's a good example of why you can't stop medications without checking with your prescriber and your pharmacist, because atrial fib is a serious condition that can lead to stroke. That is to say, if a blood clot were to go from the heart to the brain, that can be devastating. And so you probably do need to be on a blood thinner, no question. Shall we go to Richmond, Virginia, Terry, line 2, and talk to Caroline?
Oh, we can do that.
Hi, Caroline. What's on your mind? Hello, Caroline.
This is Carolyn from Wilmington.
Carolyn.
Go right ahead, Carolyn.
Wilmington. I don't know why we thought you were from... I know why, because our new phone system says that your phone is from Richmond, but you are actually in Wilmington.
Let's find out what her question is.
I was on proton pump inhibitors for a very long time. I found out about the research associating it with dementia. My mother had dementia and was also on PPIs. So I switched to apple cider vinegar and water. And then I also found out that I should not be eating fatty foods, chocolate, caffeine before bedtime because it relaxes the upper sphincter of the stomach, and not to lie down for at least 2 hours after I ate. And I'm very happy to say after, 20 years on PPIs, I am off them. I take Zantac every now and then when I do something like eat something like potato chips or something that really, are greasy. But other than that, it's just been great.
Carolyn, thanks so much for sharing your success story. That is terrific.
Well, don't go away just yet, Carolyn. Why did you think that PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, could be a problem for the brain?
Well, there's a long-term study of, I think it's nuns. It's either the nurses study or the nun study. And if you'd like, I can look that up. It came out in, I want to say, February of 2017 or March of 2017. So I can look that up. And but I talked to my doctor about that too. He was like, well, you try what you want to try.
It is a really good idea, Carolyn, to talk with your doctor before you stop taking any prescription medicine. So we're glad you did that. And there is some data suggesting that PPIs are linked to a greater risk for dementia.
Now, Carolyn, people heard you say apple cider vinegar for heartburn or reflux, and they're going, why would you want to do that? That's crazy.
It does sound like that it's backward, doesn't it? It sounds like, why would you want to make something more acidic? and I'm not sure I understand the chemistry of it, but it really, really works. And it doesn't take long to get used to it. I just put like 2 tablespoons in my, I started out with 1 and then 2 tablespoons in my bottle of water, that I have. I guess it's a 10 or 12 ounce bottle, and then just drink that and then fill it back up. And it made a huge difference. And then I got to where I just liked the water with the apple cider vinegar in it. It just became my favorite.
Well, you're not the first one to share this, so we just wanted to clarify that you weren't making up something that was totally crazy, and people tell us it works. And, Terry, there are so many side effects that we have heard about with regard to PPIs over the last 10 years. Increased risk of heart attacks, increased risk of strokes, increased risk of osteoporosis. I mean, just the list goes on and on. Kidney damage. So, the drugs have a place.
Right, but not everybody needs them for years and years.
If you've got an ulcer, they will help cure the ulcer very quickly, but just to treat routine heartburn, not necessarily such a great idea.
Joe, back to the phones. Let's talk to Leela in Florida. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Leela.
What's up?
Hello, Joe and Terry. I just wanted to call. I've had a health food store in the Brandon area for the last 22 years, and my background is in medicine. I worked at Tampa General for 10 years. But what I do with the patients and the customers that are sent from the doctor's offices is I actually work as a patient's advocate. I teach them to make a list. A simple idea is to sit down at your computer, use a different font. At the top of the page, put your name in bold letters, larger than the rest of the page. Put the date of your appointment with your doctor. The first paragraph is a summary of your health situation and what is going on with you, your history of childbirth if you're a woman, any history of issues that have occurred in a big way, gallbladder removal or whatever may have happened to you. In the middle part of the page, so that's the first third of the page, the second, or the content of the page, is basically the list of drugs they're taking, the dosage, the duration, how long, the side effects, and that list is in the middle. So it takes a little while, but at the same time, it alerts the doctor to what you're currently taking.
Really good advice. That is really excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. And Terry, we actually have something on our website.
We do indeed, and you can get it for free. Download our drug safety checklist, which will help you make a list of the sort that Leela was just describing. We were having a little difficulty understanding Leela. It was not a great connection.
No. Here's an email, Terry. My mother is now 91 and in a nursing home with dementia, lack of mobility, and she's incontinent. She's been taking statins for close to 40 years because her cholesterol was, quote, high, end quote. She had a severe urinary tract infection, which accelerated her dementia and moved her to the nursing home. She seemed to only have a few months left at best. So I made the decision to spare her the blood draws and liver checks, which went along with the statins. That was 1.5 years ago. She still has some memory loss and struggles with speech, but her personality has returned. Her confusion has diminished. She's happy, enjoys her food and birds and flowers and visitors. She has no signs of heart problems. For us, it was a good decision.
Well, and Joe, there is actually even research that it is safe for doctors to deprescribe and carefully get patients off statins once they get to a point where the statin is no longer considered, where their life expectancy is not so great that a statin will extend it.
Now, I'd like to get your opinion. What do you think of all of those prescription drug ads on television? Those commercials for Cialis, for ED, the 2 bathtubs, Xeljanz. Don't you love those X words, Terry? Xeljanz for rheumatoid arthritis. Then there's Eliquis for AFib, Trulicity for diabetes, Otezla, there's another Z, for plaque psoriasis. You always hear those commercials that say, ask your doctor if drug X is right for you. What do you think? Are you getting a little sick and tired of watching so many drug commercials on television?
I'd be surprised if there were people who weren't a little tired of that. Joe, we have one last email, I think. Mary Kay says, I was taking daily Tylenol and ibuprofen alternating for arthritis. I stopped them when the humidity went down just to see if I would still have the arthritis pain, and bam, I had a bodacious migraine headache, including lights in my eyes. The eye doctor said it was a rebound headache. So I went cold turkey and had a migraine for 3 days. A week later, I tried the Tylenol ibuprofen again and got an instant migraine. I swore I would never take those pain relievers again. Instead, I use turmeric and curcumin, and my arthritis is way better with no rebound headaches. So these pain relievers can cause rebound headache if you stop them, if you have been taking them daily. So it is something to keep in mind.
And, it's really important never to stop those antidepressants suddenly, or even some of the pain relievers. I mentioned Lyrica, pregabalin, or sertraline, tramadol, or venlafaxine. Never, ever stop these drugs suddenly.
In fact, we really want to stress that as important as it is to check your meds, and it is National Check Your Meds Day today, so do it. Don't stop any of your prescription drugs without talking first to your doctor, because it can be very important to know exactly how to stop them if stopping them is appropriate. And you do need to not stop the drugs that you absolutely need.
Here's another email. My late mother-in-law was on numerous medications, and the number was growing as she developed new ailments. Unbeknownst to her children, she had gone through her entire savings.
She got a new doctor who discontinued about half of her prescriptions, and my mother-in-law felt dramatically better, could now afford her prescriptions. So she spent her entire savings and then some on meds that only made her feel worse. Yeah. Well, Joe, I think we're getting close to the end of the show.
We are, and we just need to remind people that the pharmacist is your friend, and you do need to go in and take all of your medications, all of your dietary supplements, all of those over-the-counter drugs that you've been taking on a regular basis, and make sure that the pharmacist has an opportunity to sit down with you and really give you some quality time on what is essential and what may not be necessary. Your pharmacist may need to check with your physician. You will almost assuredly have to check with your physician, the prescriber, and just find out what is and what is not necessary. And whenever they start taking your list in the doctor's office and putting it into the electronic health record, ask them if there's anything that could be deleted.
Absolutely. It's a good idea to ask. Make sure you know why you're taking what you're taking and whether you can discontinue. Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Kimani Hall provided technical assistance. Al Wadarski is the engineer. Dave Gredden edits our interviews, and we want to congratulate Dave and his wife Amy on Simon's entry into the world.
Yes, absolutely. You can subscribe to the free podcast of our show or the free email newsletter. And if you listen to the podcast, we'd be grateful for a review on iTunes. If you'd like to purchase today's show, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is 1098. And remember, you can also get our free drug safety questionnaire by going to peoplespharmacy.com. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you for listening, and please do join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to The People's Pharmacy.